Dr. Han stared at the data screen with three of his eye stalks while the fourth rubbed against his temple in confusion. The numbers made no sense. They had to be wrong. "Run the scan again," he said to his assistant Al. "I have run it 6 times, doctor. The results are consistent." Han was one of the most respected psychologists in the Galactic Consortium. His species, had mapped the emotional patterns of 47 different intelligent races. They understood joy, curiosity, anger, and even the brief shadows of sadness that sometimes crossed a healthy mind. But this was impossible. The human sitting in the scanning chair looked normal enough. Her name was Sarah, a teacher from the city called Seattle. She had volunteered for their study with enthusiasm, eager to help the visiting alien researchers understand humanity better. She sat calmly, hands folded in her lap, wearing what humans called a smile. But the neural scan told a different story. It showed layers of sadness so deep that Han's equipment could not find the bottom. Grief over a mother who died 3 years ago, worry about money and her aging father, anxiety about the state of the world, a persistent feeling that perhaps she was not good enough, not doing enough, not being enough. And underneath it all, a quiet awareness that one day she too would die, and perhaps nothing she did would matter in the vast emptiness of space. Any carrying even a fraction of this weight would be hospitalized immediately. Most species would be catatonic. "Ms. Han said carefully, how do you feel right now?" "Pretty good, actually," Sarah said. "A little tired. I have a lot of papers to grade this weekend, but I'm happy to be here. This is exciting." Han's assistant made a small chirping sound of distress. The human's words did not match her neural state at all. "Are you experiencing any difficulty, any pain or discomfort in your thoughts?" Sarah tilted her head. "You mean like, am I sad about stuff? Sure, I guess. My mom died a few years back and I miss her. And money's tight, you know. And sometimes I worry I'm not making a real difference with my students." She shrugged. "But that's just life, isn't it? You keep going." "You keep going," Han repeated slowly, "while carrying all of this." "All of what?" The research team had come to Earth 6 months ago with a simple mission. Humanity was a young species, recently discovered, and the initial reports had been strange. Humans had built a thriving civilization across an entire planet. They had art, music, science, and philosophy. They had sent machines to other worlds and were preparing to travel to the stars themselves. But the preliminary psychological surveys had shown something alarming. Humans appeared to suffer from chronic emotional dysfunction on a massive scale. Billions of them carried what should be debilitating levels of sadness, anxiety, and existential dread. By all established models, their society should have collapsed long ago. The consortium had sent Han to investigate. Either the surveys were wrong, or something very strange was happening on Earth. Over the next 3 months, the team conducted thousands of scans. They studied humans in many different cities and cultures. They watched people in their homes, at their workplaces, during their leisure time. They were careful and respectful, always asking permission, always explaining their purpose. And everywhere they looked, they found the same impossible pattern. A man named Robert worked in a small bakery. He had lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago. The neural scans showed he thought about her every single day. The grief sat in his mind like a stone at the bottom of a deep well. Yet every morning he woke at 4 in the morning to bake bread. He joked with customers. He made birthday cakes for children he did not know. He donated leftover pastries to homeless shelters. "Don't you want the sadness to go away?" Al asked him once. Robert had paused, hands covered in flour. "Of course I do. I'd give anything to have her back." He was quiet for a moment. "But the sadness means she was real, that what we had mattered. I carry it because it's all I have left of her, and while I carry it I might as well make some bread. People need bread." A teenage girl named suffered from what humans called anxiety. Her mind constantly generated catastrophic scenarios, failed tests, social humiliation, disappointing her parents, the end of the world. The neural scans showed this happened dozens of times per hour, every day. She was also the editor of her school newspaper and had written a series of articles about climate change that had won national awards. When they interviewed her, she was working on a new piece about mental health. "Doesn't the anxiety make it hard to work?" Han asked. "It makes everything hard," said. "But I figure if my brain's going to tell me the world is ending anyway, I might as well try to do something about it. And writing helps. When I write, I feel like I have some control, like I can make sense of things." A soldier named Maria had returned from a war. She had seen friends die. She woke up screaming 3 nights a week. The scans showed trauma carved into her neural patterns like scars. But during the day, she worked at a community center, teaching conflict resolution to at-risk youth. An old man named Henry was dying of a slow disease. He knew he had perhaps 6 months left. The awareness sat in his mind like a countdown clock. He spent his days volunteering at a hospice, sitting with other dying patients, holding their hands, telling them jokes. A comedian named Alex joked about his depression on stage. Thousands of people laughed at his observations about therapy and medication and the absurdity of existence. After his shows, young people lined up to thank him for making them feel less alone. Han compiled the data with growing confusion. The pattern was clear and consistent. Humans carried oceans of sadness. They were crushed by the weight of their own consciousness, their awareness of suffering and death and meaninglessness. And yet they persisted. They built. They created. They helped each other. "I don't understand," he told his team one evening. "By every model we have, they should be broken. They should be unable to function." "Perhaps," Al suggested quietly, "our models are incomplete." That night, Han could not sleep. He reviewed the data again and again. He watched recordings of humans going about their daily lives. A mother comforting a crying child despite her own exhaustion. A doctor working a double shift to save lives while grieving his own loss. An artist painting beauty while battling darkness in her own mind. He thought about his own species, felt happiness easily and deeply. They experienced curiosity and contentment. When they felt sad, it was brief and shallow, quickly passing like a cloud across a sunny sky. They had built a good society, peaceful and prosperous. But they had never built anything like what he saw on Earth. Their art was pleasant but not profound. Their philosophy was logical but not deep. They felt joy, but did they understand it the way humans seem to? Did they treasure it the way these strange beings treasured every small moment of light against their vast darkness? Han pulled up the scan of Sarah again, the teacher with her ocean of melancholy and her tired smile. He looked past the sadness this time, trying to see what he had missed before. And there, threaded through the darkness like veins of gold through stone, he saw something else. Determination, purpose, love for her students, hope that tomorrow might be better, gratitude for small things, the memory of her mother's laugh preserved like treasure, connections to friends and family holding her up like cables supporting a bridge over an abyss. The sadness was not the whole story. It was not even most of the story. It was the foundation, perhaps, but built upon that foundation was something extraordinary. Humans did not succeed despite their melancholy. They were not broken beings limping along. They had learned to build with darkness itself, to weave it into something stronger than simple happiness could ever be. Han sat back in his chair, all 4 eye stalks wide. He finally understood why he had been so confused. He had been studying humanity backward. He had been looking at their pain and asking how they survived it. But that was the wrong question. The right question was, what did they become because of it? The consortium wanted results, so Han designed a new study. Instead of just scanning humans and documenting their emotional states, they would conduct deep interviews. They would ask about the sadness directly. They would try to understand not just what humans felt, but what they did with those feelings. The team selected 5 subjects for intensive study. Each represented a different aspect of human experience. There was a middle-aged man who had lost his daughter to a rare disease. There was an elderly woman who had survived a genocide in her homeland before fleeing to America. There was a young scientist whose doctoral research had just been proven wrong by new data. There was Jennifer, a single mother working 3 jobs to support her children. And there was Alex, the comedian they had interviewed before. The first session was with. He sat in the interview room looking tired but composed. The neural scans showed the grief was still there, as strong as the day his daughter died. It had been 7 years. "Tell me about," Han said gently. Smiled, and it was not a happy smile but not entirely sad either. She was 8 when she died. Loved dinosaurs, wanted to be a paleontologist. He paused. She was smart, funny, kind to other kids, even the weird ones. She would have been 15 now. "The pain of losing her has not decreased," Han observed. "Our scans show it is as intense now as it was years ago." "Yeah," said. "People tell you it gets better, that time heals, but that's not really true. You just learn to carry it, it becomes part of you." "Does it make your life worse? Do you wish you could forget?" Looked shocked. "Forget? Never. The pain is proof she existed, that she mattered. If I stopped hurting, it would be like she never lived at all." "But surely you would be happier without the pain." "Happier?" Considered this. "Maybe, in a shallow kind of way, but I wouldn't be better. After died, I started a foundation. We fund research into rare pediatric diseases. We've raised $3 million. We've helped fund the research that might save other kids." He met Han's eyes. "I did that because of the pain, because I knew what it felt like to lose everything. If I didn't hurt, I wouldn't have done anything. I would have just gone back to my comfortable life." Han made notes. "So the sadness motivated you." "It's more than that. The sadness changed me, made me understand what matters. Before I got sick, I worked 60 hours a week at a job I didn't care about, trying to make more money to buy things I didn't need. I barely saw my family. I thought that was success." He shook his head. "Now I know what success actually is. It's sitting with my wife in the evening. It's helping people who are suffering. It's doing something that matters, even if it's small. I learned that by losing everything." Over the following weeks, Han interviewed the others. Each story was different but carried the same strange pattern. Had seen her entire village destroyed. She had walked across mountains with her infant son, fleeing violence, watching people die of cold and hunger. The trauma still woke her at night, but she had rebuilt her life in a new country. She had learned a new language at 50 years old. She had worked in a factory and sent her son to university. Now she volunteered with refugee organizations, helping new arrivals navigate the same impossible journey she had survived. "You could rest," Al said to her. "You have survived, you have earned peace." Laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Peace is not the same as rest. I have peace even while I work. I have it because I work. When I help a frightened mother fill out paperwork, when I translate at the hospital, when I tell my story so others know they can survive too, that is peace. The trauma does not go away, but I do not let it be meaningless. I give it purpose." The scientist was perhaps the most interesting case. His entire doctoral thesis had been disproven by new experimental data. 5 years of work gone. The neural scans showed crushing disappointment and feelings of failure. But when they interviewed him, he was already designing a new experiment based on the data that had invalidated his old work. "Are you not devastated?" Han asked. "Oh, I'm devastated," said cheerfully. "I cried for 3 days, ate an entire cake by myself, questioned every decision I've ever made, the whole thing," he grinned. "But then I realized something cool. The new data means we understand reality better now. We were wrong, but now we're less wrong. That's literally the point of science. If I had been right, we wouldn't have learned anything new." "So you are not angry that your work was wasted?" "It wasn't wasted. It was necessary. Someone had to be wrong first so we could figure out the right answer. That's how knowledge advances, through failure." He leaned forward. "And honestly, being wrong is kind of freeing. Now I get to explore new ideas without being attached to the old ones. My ego hurts, sure, but my curiosity is on fire. Jennifer, the single mother, was almost too tired to interview. She worked as a nurse during the day, cleaned offices at night, and drove for a ride-sharing service on weekends. She was doing all this to save money for her daughter's education. "Don't you resent this burden?" Han asked. "You could have an easier life." Jennifer looked confused by the question. "They're my kids. I love them. Yeah, I'm tired. Yeah, it's hard. But when my oldest daughter got accepted to college and I knew we could actually afford to send her," she smiled, and the neural scans showed the smile was genuine despite the exhaustion. "That feeling was worth every missed hour of sleep. The struggle makes the success mean something." But it was Alex, the comedian, who finally gave Han the insight that changed everything. They were in the interview room late at night. Alex had just finished a show, and he was still buzzing with energy despite the depression the scans showed, coiling through his neural patterns like dark smoke. "You make jokes about your pain," Han said. "You perform your suffering for audiences. Why?" "Because it's funny," Alex said. "And because it's true. And because when I say the things I feel, the things I'm afraid to say in normal life and people laugh, it means I'm not alone. They're laughing because they feel it too." "But doesn't this exploit your pain, turn it into entertainment?" "No, man, it transforms it. Look, the depression doesn't go away. Some nights I feel like I'm drowning, like nothing matters and nothing ever will. That's real, that's true." He spread his hands. "But if I can take that feeling, that awful heavy feeling, and shape it into something that makes people laugh, if I can make someone in the audience who feels the same way realize they're not alone, then the pain isn't just pain anymore. It's raw material. It's the thing I build with." Han felt something click in his mind. "You build with it." "Yeah, exactly. Sadness and pain and fear, they're not bugs in the human system. They're features, they're information. They tell us what matters, what's at stake, what needs to change. Without them, we wouldn't create anything meaningful. Why make art if you've never felt beauty slipping away? Why fight for justice if you've never felt the pain of injustice? Why love deeply if you've never feared loss?" "But the cost," Han said quietly, "the cost is so high." Alex nodded. "Yeah, it is. Some people don't make it, the weight is too much, and that's a tragedy. But for those of us who do keep going, who learn to carry it, who figure out how to build something with it," he smiled, and it was the saddest and most beautiful expression Han had ever seen. "We become more than we would have been without it. The depth of our pain becomes the depth of our joy. The darkness makes us appreciate the light. Our mortality makes us treasure every moment. Our suffering teaches us compassion." Han sat in silence for a long time after Alex left. He reviewed all the interviews, all the scans, all the data. He thought about his own species, with their shallow contentment and pleasant lives. He thought about the other species in the consortium, each with their own emotional patterns, none quite like this. Humans were not broken. They were not dysfunctional. They were something the galaxy had never seen before. They had learned to dive into darkness and bring back light. Han stood before the Galactic Psychological Consortium, the most prestigious gathering of mental health experts from across known space. Representatives from 60 species filled the auditorium, their various forms of attention focused on him. "Distinguished colleagues," he began. "6 months ago, I was sent to Earth to investigate a psychological anomaly. Humanity appeared to suffer from chronic emotional dysfunction on a civilization-wide scale. I was tasked with determining if they needed intervention or assistance." He pulled up the neural scans, showing the deep wells of sadness, the persistent anxiety, the ever-present awareness of mortality. The audience made various sounds of distress and concern. "These scans are accurate," Han continued. "Humans do indeed carry levels of melancholy that would incapacitate most species represented in this room. By conventional models, they should be unable to function." He paused, letting the data sink in. "Yet Earth has a thriving global civilization. They have produced art, literature, music, and philosophy of remarkable depth. They have made significant scientific advances. They actively work to reduce suffering despite being surrounded by it. They maintain complex social bonds. They find joy despite profound sadness. A colleague raised a tentacle. Surely this is proof they need help. They are suffering needlessly. That was my initial conclusion, Han agreed, until I conducted deeper research. He brought up new data. I want to share a discovery that has fundamentally changed my understanding of psychology. He showed interview clips, talking about his daughter and his foundation, describing how trauma gave her purpose, excited about being proven wrong, Jennifer smiling despite exhaustion, Alex performing his pain into comedy. Humans do not succeed despite their melancholy. They are forged by it. Their sadness teaches them empathy. Their grief shows them what matters. Their awareness of death gives them urgency. Their suffering makes them compassionate. He pulled up a complex diagram. I call this transformative integration. Humans do not compartmentalize or suppress their negative emotions. They integrate them into their identity and use them as foundation for growth. The pain becomes part of who they are, and they build their strength on top of it. Observer, a species known for emotional stoicism, spoke up. This seems inefficient. Why not simply eliminate the negative emotions? Because you cannot have one without the other, Han explained. Human joy is profound precisely because they understand sorrow. Their love is deep because they fear loss. Their creativity springs from their need to make meaning in the face of meaninglessness. If you removed their capacity for sadness, you would diminish everything else. He showed more data. We offered a hypothetical scenario to 10,000 humans, a treatment that would eliminate their capacity for depression, anxiety, and grief. 73% refused. They understood intuitively what took me months to learn. Their darkness and their light are inseparable. The room was silent. Han could feel the shift in the atmosphere as understanding began to dawn. There is more, he continued. Human civilization is unique in the consortium in several ways. They have the highest per charitable giving, the most extensive volunteer programs, the most developed crisis support systems, the richest tradition of art and music focused on emotional expression, the most sophisticated philosophy regarding meaning and purpose. He met the eyes of his colleagues. These are not coincidences. These are direct results of their emotional depth. Because humans suffer, they understand suffering. Because they hurt, they want to reduce hurt. Because they struggle to find meaning, they create beautiful and complex frameworks for understanding existence. A young researcher from the species, known for their logical minds, raised a question. Are you suggesting that negative emotions are beneficial? I am suggesting that they are neither beneficial nor harmful in isolation. They are tools. Humans have learned to use them as tools. The sadness is not the point. What they do with the sadness is the point. Han pulled up his final slide. It was a quote from Henry, the dying volunteer he had interviewed. We're all just walking each other home through the dark. The dark doesn't go away, but neither do we. And somehow that's enough. Somehow that's everything. This, Han said quietly, is the key insight. Humans understand that existence involves suffering. They do not deny it or run from it. They acknowledge it and then they choose to persist anyway. More than persist, they choose to help others persist. The darkness becomes a shared experience that binds them together. He looked around the room. I propose we reclassify humanity. They are not psychologically dysfunctional. They are emotionally evolved in a way the consortium has never encountered. They have developed a relationship with suffering that transforms it from a weakness into a source of profound strength. The presentation continued for another hour. Han showed case study after case study. He demonstrated how human art reflected their emotional complexity. He explained how their philosophy grappled with questions that many species had simply optimized away. He showed how their social structures were designed to support individuals through darkness rather than pretending darkness did not exist. When he finished, the silence lasted for a full minute. Then a representative from the spoke, "We need to learn from them." Others nodded or made their species equivalent gesture of agreement. A dialogue began. The who had optimized away most emotions in favor of logic admitted their suicide rates had been climbing for generations. They felt no sadness but also no deep connection. They wanted to understand how humans maintained relationships despite pain, or perhaps because of it. The WHO had genetically engineered away anxiety in their population, reported that innovation had stalled. Without worry about the future, they had lost the drive to prepare for it. They wanted to study how humans balanced concern with action. Even hands-on people, recognized something missing in their pleasant lives. Their art was beautiful but not moving. Their philosophy was sound but not profound. They had happiness but not joy, contentment but not fulfillment. Within months, human psychological consultants were in high demand across the consortium. Not therapists trying to fix other species, but teachers sharing what humanity had learned through of suffering. Sarah, the teacher from Seattle, found herself training educators on how to help students process difficult emotions, worked with researchers to help them understand the relationship between loss and motivation, spoke to refugee populations across multiple worlds, sharing her story of survival and rebuilding. The comedian Alex became unexpectedly popular. His shows sold out on a dozen worlds. Species that had never understood humor suddenly grasped it when he explained that laughter was how humans touched their pain without being consumed by it. Comedy is truth with a beat, he told an audience of. You take the thing that hurts, the thing that's real and true and awful, and you find the rhythm in it, the absurdity, the shared experience. And when you all laugh together, you're saying, yes, this is real and we see it and we're going to be okay anyway. The cultural exchange went both ways. Humans learned from other species too. They taught them meditation techniques that humans adapted for managing anxiety. The shared logical frameworks that helped humans process trauma more effectively. They demonstrated how to cultivate joy deliberately, which humans incorporated into their therapy practices. But the fundamental insight remained. Humanity's relationship with darkness was unique and valuable. Han published his complete findings in a paper that became the most widely read psychological text in consortium history. He called it The Infinite Ocean, Transformative Integration of Suffering in Human Psychology. The title came from a conversation with Sarah, months after their first interview. They had become friends, in the way that sometimes happens between researcher and subject when both are genuinely curious about each other. You once told me humans just keep going, Han said. I understand now what you meant, but I still wonder how. How do you wake up every day knowing what you know, feeling what you feel, and choose to continue? Sarah had thought about it for a while. They were sitting in a park watching children play. A light rain was falling, but neither of them minded. I don't think we have a choice about the ocean, she said finally. The sadness, the fear, the grief, the awareness of mortality and meaninglessness, it's all there. It's an ocean and we're in it. We can't drain the ocean. We can't pretend we're not in it. She watched a child fall down and then get back up laughing. But we can learn to swim. We can learn to dive deep and come back up. We can teach each other how to float when we're tired. And sometimes, if we dive deep enough, we find treasures down there. Understanding, empathy, purpose, beauty, things we could never find in shallow water. An infinite ocean, Han had murmured. Yeah, infinite. But so are we, in a way. As long as we keep swimming, as long as we keep diving and surfacing and teaching each other and pulling each other up when we're drowning, we're infinite too. The ocean doesn't end, but neither does our ability to navigate it. That conversation became the heart of his paper. The conclusion read, psychological strength is not measured by the absence of pain, but by what one builds while carrying it. Humanity does not have a shallow pool of strength covering an ocean of sadness. They have an infinite ocean of strength, precisely as deep as their capacity for sorrow. One cannot exist without the other. To be human is to carry impossible weight and somehow transform that weight into wings. Years passed. The relationship between humanity and the Galactic Consortium deepened. Humans joined the consortium officially and began contributing to its governance and direction. They brought their strange, beautiful perspective to every problem. When they faced a philosophical crisis about the meaning of their existence, human philosophers helped them understand that meaning was not something you discovered, but something you created through choices and actions. When they struggled with an epidemic of purposelessness, human social workers taught them about volunteering, about finding meaning through service, about how helping others could fill the void that pure logic left behind. When a war threatened between two species over a territorial dispute, human negotiators brought both sides together and said, "Tell us what you're afraid of losing. Tell us what grief you're trying to avoid." By acknowledging the fear and potential pain, they found solutions that pure logic had missed. Han continued his research, but he also did something unexpected. He started a program to train therapists from across the consortium in what he called human-informed psychology. The core principle was simple: pain is information, and suffering can be transformed. He often thought about all the humans he had interviewed. His foundation had helped fund the research that led to a cure for his daughter's disease. It came too late but dozens of other children lived because of work he had supported. Had helped resettle over 1,000 refugee families before she died peacefully in her sleep at 93, surrounded by her children, and had won a Nobel Prize for his work on the new theory that replaced his old thesis. In his acceptance speech, he talked about the value of being wrong. Jennifer's daughters both graduated from university. One became a doctor, the other an engineer. They often spoke about their mother's sacrifices and how those sacrifices taught them the value of education and hard work. Alex continued performing, his comedy evolving as he grew older. He started a foundation that provided free mental health services and comedy workshops to at-risk populations. "Laughter and therapy," he said. "Two ways to look at your pain without flinching." Sarah kept teaching. She never became famous or particularly successful by human standards. She graded papers, taught her classes, dealt with difficult students and budget cuts and all the small frustrations of her profession. She missed her mother. She worried about money. She felt tired. And every day, she went back into the classroom and tried to help young people learn not just academic subjects, but how to think, how to question, how to find meaning in a complicated world. Han visited her one last time before he returned to his home world to retire. They sat in the same park where they had talked about oceans. "Did you ever regret it?" he asked. "The study, I mean, letting us examine your pain so closely." Sarah smiled. "No, I'm glad you came. I'm glad you understood. I think it's important that the galaxy knows we're not broken. We're just swimming." "You taught us how to swim," Han said. "My entire species, we thought happiness was the goal. But you showed us that happiness without depth is just distraction. Real joy comes from knowing sorrow and choosing light anyway." Did it help, learning all this? It changed everything. They are forming deeper bonds now. They are innovating again. My people are creating art that moves the soul instead of just pleasing the eye. And all of it because we learned from you that strength is not the absence of struggle. Strength is what you become by struggling. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the rain. "There's something I never told you," Sarah said eventually. "When you first studied me, when I saw those scans showing all the sadness I carry, I was ashamed. I thought it meant I was weak, that something was wrong with me. And now I understand it's my superpower, not the sadness itself but what I do with it, how it makes me more patient with struggling students, how it helps me see when someone's hurting, How it reminds me to be grateful for small moments of beauty. She looked at him. You helped me understand that about myself, so thank you. Han felt something he had never felt before, a ache in his chest that was somehow good, a sadness that made the moment more precious instead of less, a human feeling. We're all just walking each other home through the dark, he said, quoting the hospice worker. Yeah, Sarah agreed. Yeah, we are. The paper that Han wrote changed the Galactic Consortium's understanding of psychology, emotion, and strength. But perhaps more importantly, it changed how millions of individuals across dozens of species understood their own pain. They learned that suffering was not meaningless, that darkness could be transformed, that the deepest strength came from the deepest struggle, that you could carry an ocean of sorrow and still dance. Humanity had given the galaxy a gift, not the elimination of pain, but a framework for making pain meaningful, not the erasure of darkness, but a way to find light within it. And in return, the galaxy gave humanity something too: recognition, respect, a place at the table not despite their melancholy, but because of everything they had learned by carrying it. The infinite ocean remained. For humans, it always would. But now they did not swim alone. The galaxy swam with them, learning their strokes, understanding their depth, marveling at their strength. And somewhere in the depths that only humans could reach, treasures continued to surface. Empathy, meaning, purpose, beauty, art, love, all the things that came from diving deep into darkness and refusing to let it be the end of the story. The darkness was infinite, but so it turned out was human strength, and in the end that made all the difference.